ladies and gentlemen, this is Properties of Sound and correlates with Chapter 15.2 in your textbook. Your key concepts and vocabulary for this video are: what affects pitch? What affects loudness? What is intensity? What does a decibel measure? And what causes the Doppler effect? Now, these underlined words, these are the words that you're also going to want to make sure that you get the definitions of. So let's talk about pitch. Here we've got a lovely little songbird. When you think of a songbird, you probably think of something really high like this. A songbird has a high-pitched song, whereas here we've got the lion. And the lion, if you imagine it roaring, would be a very low sound. And that low sound is a lower pitch. So pitch is simply how high or low something sounds. So if you notice, here the frequency is pretty high. It's a lot of bumps. So it's a high pitch. The higher the frequency, the higher pitch. Whereas here, the lower the frequency, the lower the pitch. And this is how we remember it. So pitch is determined by frequency. Now, loudness. We often describe something as being loud, but loudness is actually determined by two things. One, energy, and two, intensity. So let's look at what these mean. Energy, for example, right now, I'm putting in a moderate amount of energy into my voice. Now I'm putting in a lot more energy into my voice. Energy is the volume of the sound. That's generally what you think of. So here, the energy is relatively low. Here, the same bird, just like I just yelled my head off, the energy got much higher. It's still the same frequency, but it's at a more energetic level. The amplitude got higher. And so the higher the amplitude, the louder the perceived noise is because it's got more energy. Now, we've also got intensity. And intensity is kind of a confusing thing. Let's actually talk about what it is before we look at the definition. So intensity is the amount of loudness you have spread over the area that it is. So, for example, here I've got a source of a sound. If you're standing close to that source of the sound is only spread over this one little area. So it sounds more intense. Then, when you're way out here, because sound travels out in all directions and it spreads out as it goes, the energy that I'm originally putting into the sound gets less. It seems less as you get further away. So the intensity lessens. Like those of you that are right next to me when I have to scream my head off, that is really intense if you're right next to me. But if you're across the room, really not that bad because that energy has been dispersed. So the proper definition of it is the amount of energy carried per second, which if you remember, energy transferred over time is power, over the area. So standing close to the stage in a rock concert will seem more intense than standing further away from the stage. The amount of energy behind the noise hasn't changed, but it seems like it has. So that's intensity. Now, let's talk about decibels. You might have heard about decibels, heard about them measuring maybe speakers or amplifiers or things like that. So what is a decibel? A decibel is simply a unit to measure loudness. It's abbreviated with a lowercase d and a capital B, and we actually have a range of hearing. Our lowest range of hearing is 0 decibels. No one can hear below that. And we go all the way up to about 140 decibels. Once you get about above 100 decibels, that's when permanent hearing damage can happen if you don't have ear protection. So when you're running the lawnmower or at concerts, like when I used to work security at all those concerts, a few times they had me down in the pit and I had to be circling through the crowd. I had earplugs in because I didn't want my hearing to go bad just because of my job. And like quiet sounds like rustling of leaves, they're around 10. Conversations, they're around 60 decibels. So the decibels are like loudness of the sound. Fun fact, kids can often hear much quieter than adults can. So some children are much more sensitive to sounds than adults. Now the last thing is what causes the Doppler effect. Let's look at this image here. Here we've got a car. Let's say its car alarm is going off. If you've ever stood near a car with its alarm going off, you know that it sounds really annoying. But it doesn't sound like the sound changes. You can walk around the car, it doesn't change. But if you've ever had a car with the alarm going off drive past you, or like a fire truck with the siren going, or a car laying on the horn like meow. When it gets coming towards you, it sounds like it's higher pitched, and then as it passes you, that sound goes lower. The reason being is because those sounds are traveling out in all directions at the same time, but as it goes this way, because it's traveling into the sounds, it squishes them together, so the frequency of the sound is higher, making it sound higher pitch. Whereas after that car has passed you, the waves are seeming like they're being stretched out, so the frequency is lower, which makes the sound seem lower at a lower pitch. So that's the Doppler effect, which is simply the change in frequency a wave has as it moves in relation to an observer. That's it. Please make sure your notes hit all the key concepts and vocabulary.